Good morning and welcome to our session today. I wish to confirm whether I can be heard loud and clear. Ian, if you're on the call, please confirm for me whether we are loud and clear and ready to begin. I'm still trying to get a confirmation that we are good to go.
Yes, MC Okari, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Thank you so much for the confirmation. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your attendance today. My name is Okari, and it's always a pleasure and privilege to have you on board today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us from wherever you are. We want to appreciate you for being with us today. We also want to thank our Almighty God for the opportunity, because indeed it's a blessing to have us on this session. And of course, IIK for organizing this. And the greatest of it is that you decided to do it for free. This is amazing. It is the hand of giving, and indeed, it's a blessing for all of us who are attending this session. So it's an honor and a privilege to welcome you all on board. And at this juncture, I wish to welcome Mahonse Christine Ronga to lead us in the opening prayer and introduction of the director. Madam Christine, karibu.
Thank you very much, MC Okari. I want to welcome each and every delegate on the call and wish them well. Thank you for honoring our request and our invite to join us in this event today on staff wellness at the workplace. You not have chosen a better place to be, because right now there are so many challenges in the workplace. And I think for all of us, we are tired of surviving or barely making it each day. We want to know what the issues are and how to get out of them so that we can thrive in the workplace. So feel welcome, even as we wait for our speakers to come on and to really inform us about this particular topic. But before that, let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord Almighty, we thank you and we honor you for your goodness to us. Thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for this particular event that has come in a very timely way, that Jehovah God, it will help us to make better our stay in the workplace so that we can thrive. We thank you so much for each speaker. We thank you because we know you're going to use them to help us. And we also pray for each delegate that King of Glory, you may help us to have a heart ready and a mind ready to take in all the good stuff that will be coming on. We ask you that Jehovah God, you'll see us through successfully. And this we pray, trusting and believing in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. At this juncture, I'd like to invite our director, the IIK director, that is Mrs. Agnes Masharia, so that she can give us her opening remarks. Karibu sana, director.
Okay, thank you, Christine. And good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to invite each and every one of you to today's timely topical program. A program which we really cannot have enough of. Actually, I think it is a program which organizations and institutions should be having on a monthly basis. But first things first, let me thank all our delegates and leaders of all the companies represented in our program today. Namely, we have First Assurance, Minet, AIG, ICA Lion, Kenyan Alliance, Sedgwick, IRA, Intra-Africa, Direct Line, Liberty, Heritage, and Occidental. And I know Madison should be coming on. I want to give a hearty welcome to our great and passionate speakers of today. And I cannot wait to hear them tackling today's topic. Angela, I feel like I already know you, and I like your passion. I have seen you speaking, and we need more Angelas in our space. Tazmin, what can I say? We were with you during our conference in Naivasha last year. We all left the conference feeling healed. If it was not because of time, we wanted to go on and go on and go on. And just to psych us ourselves for today's forum, I want to share one quote by Albus Dumbledore. And I like how our Home Secretary introduced this matter and said it is one time we really need the kind of program we are having today. So this Albus, what did he say? He said, happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one remembers to turn on the light. I want to repeat, happiness can be found even in the darkness of times if one remembers to turn on the light. And this was reminding me on Sunday, I was listening to a sermon by Joel Austin. And among the very things that he said, there is one thing that stood out for me. He challenged the church. And of course, we all know that the enemy is a specialist in instilling negative thoughts in our minds. And we can choose to continue entertaining those negative thoughts in our minds, or decide that we want to entertain positive thoughts. But even more important, what stood out for me is the fact that he said it does not take less energy to entertain negative thoughts than it takes to entertain positive thoughts. Think about that. So my challenge to you delegates, what will you choose to entertain from today onwards? Our great speakers of today will be introduced by our MC as usual, and mine is to assure you that our guest speakers will help us to turn on our lights. Delegates, I urge you all to be deliberate in learning as much as possible in the little time, and also ensure that you effectively and intensively engage our passionate great speakers of today. Enjoy the session. Over to you, MC Okari. MC Okari, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Home Secretary, can I be heard?
Yes, Madam Agnes, I can hear you.
Or did you hear my opening remarks?
Yes, I think maybe Okari just dropped off.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for the confirmation.
I hope I can be heard now. Ian, please confirm.
Yes, Okari.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Madam Director, as I was saying, thank you for your very kind, welcoming remarks. And we appreciate the fact that you've been able to give us great insight. I am very excited whenever we come to referring to light and darkness, because we just need the light to eliminate the darkness. So thank you once again for those kind, welcoming remarks. At this juncture, it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome to us our first speaker, that is Tazmin. Tazmin is an accredited leadership performance and wellness coach and trainer. She is a Marshall Goldsmith leadership coach and an associate partner of the Trusted Executive Foundation UK and the Performance Solution UK. In this case, the UK we are talking about is the United Kingdom, not Ukokino. She has worked with the clients ranging from banking, insurance, telecommunications, healthcare, aviation, and FMCG. She is also an associate faculty with the Institute of Directors Kenya, the Graduate School of Media and Communication, and a leadership program on adaptive leadership concurrently run by the Graduation School of Media and Communications and Harvard Kennedy School. Recognized by the Association of Business Psychologists UK, the Neuro Leadership Institute in the US, and with a background in clinical psychology, she combines scientific approaches together with creative techniques to give her clients unique solutions to engage with the leadership journey. So Tazmin's passion lies in supporting leaders to steer with intention and purpose so that they and their teams can flourish. Indeed, with the rich, fine taste of her understanding in this field, we welcome her to speak to us. Of course, we'll be going much later.
And he has some very interesting conversations. If only I could speak that language, though.
Welcome on board, Tazmin.
Thank you. If you can open the sharing for me. I can't seem to open the sharing button. I could open it earlier, but I'm struggling right now. I'd like to share my presentation. Elizabeth?
Ian is sorting it, Tazmin.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Our IT personnel.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, you can share now.
Okay, great. Looking for it. Can't seem to find my presentation. Sorry, Ian, I could share it before, but I'm not seeing my presentation on the share button. I'm just getting this blank screen in front of me. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can now see it.
Oh, yes. Great. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present today. It's always a pleasure to present to the Institute. I do have a background in working in this industry, and that's why I always get excited when I get called upon to speak. So, just hearing from our speakers earlier, it is obvious that how we live in organizations today is different. Okay? Things are no longer the same, and the future is going to require us to rewrite and rethink how we manage our people in organizations. And more so today than any other time, it's making mental health or psychological well-being our competitive advantage. So my presentation is going to be heavy on data, recent data on the well-being at work. And I'll also share with you some interesting information on some models of workplace well-being that I hope I can deliver to you. The arena of well-being at work is huge, right? And I really try to figure out, okay, what is it that I can share with you today that will give you some insight on what next? So thank you again, and I will start my presentation. MC, you may want to help me here a bit. So this is to really the participants. I'm curious, what comes to mind when you see this picture? I don't know if there's a chat or do you want to get interactive?
Definitely. I believe with that question, we are able to interact nicely.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody has a contribution, you just raise your hand. We will allow you to say what you have in mind about the picture. Anyone who has raised their hands? I'm not seeing any raising of hands stretched.
Is it too early in the morning? Okay.
It's very cold in Nairobi. I can see now their hands. Madam Director and Peter Kagia, they can give their answers. Kindly unmute and give your answer, Madam Director.
I think it's hiding
Thank you.
identity.
I think it looks like a gentleman and a lady communicating from far.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you, Peter Kagia, what's your response?
I think it's like putting on a mask
Mm-hmm.
or hiding identity.
Yes.
Okay. Tazmin, from my end, I can see people are very angry, and then their masks are showing smiles.
Yes. Yeah. So where I want to go with this is, you know, there's a psychological construct term for this, and it's called being functional, right? In organizations, many people look like they're highly functional, but really behind that mask, we are struggling. And that struggle is usually, most of the times, linked to mental illness. So in the organization, people may look like they're highly functional, right? But behind that mask, there is so much happening. It's like that iceberg story that we usually get told, you know? And I'd like to share this from my personal experience as a coach. So I've been in this, in this space of coaching, especially leader and executive coaching for the past 12 years. And I get clients coming to me with, initial issues such as, and also boards send their, executives for coaching with topics such as, like, for example, managing conflict, better able to communicate, building better relationships, self-awareness, better delegation, this whole issue around gravitas and being able to influence and dealing with change. And I found that initially these topics were very transactional, And as I went deeper as a coach, I was finding something very interesting. I was finding behind these very transactional topics, issues coming up like anxiety, high anxiety and worry. And I start to see substance use, addictions, highly functional people, individuals having been to rehab, right? Addictions with sleeping pills, opioids, gambling. I noticed breakdown in relationships, not only at work, but with their, primary families. Right? Loss of interest, inability to sleep, low self-esteem. And believe it or not, men also very tearful. So I started to see something very interesting, on the surface, people look highly functional, but behind that mask, there is something hiding, And that took me on a journey because my initial education was many years ago as an undergrad was in psychology and sociology. And then I went into coaching and assessments and so on. And my journey really started when I started noticing that, there's something else happening here in people at the workplace, whether they were just your everyday employee or, people sitting in leadership positions. So that took me back to school in clinical psychology because I realized that for real transformation to happen, this below the iceberg work had to start. I want to go into some interesting data that recent research has found in this field. We spend nearly 90,000 hours or 50% of our working hours at work. Okay. Now, most of the data, most of the research that has come out in this field is really, in Europe and the West and Australia. I'm seeing we are seeing very little research on well-being at work and stress at work in Kenya. But I understand from colleagues who are completing their doctorate and their master's degree, there is a lot of interest happening in research in this area. As Kenyans, I think we spend more than 50 hours of waking hours at work. By the time we leave our home, some of us leave our home at 6, 7 in the morning. By the time we get home again in the evening, it's about 8, 9. So some of us actually spend more than 50% of our waking hours at work. In a 2021 study in collaboration with the Harvard Business Review that studied 1,500 respondents in 46 countries in various sectors and seniority levels, 67% at or above a supervisory level, they found that 89% of respondents said that their work life was getting worse. 85% said that their well-being had declined. 62% experienced burnout, and I'll talk a bit about burnout later on in my presentation. 55% struggle with work-life balance. 25% were unable to connect strongly with family, colleagues, and friends. In other words, they had started to withdraw. And 21% felt that their well-being was good. In another study on work-related stress and depression or anxiety statistics in Great Britain, the total number of work-related stress, anxiety, or depression added up to 828,000 between 2019 and 2020. And remember, this is pre-COVID, so you can imagine what these statistics must be looking like currently. There is a prevalence rate of 2,400 workers per 100,000 workers and significantly higher than the previous year. Stress, depression, or anxiety was responsible for 51% of all work-related ill health cases. Right? This is psychological illness and physiological illness. And I'll break that down for you as well later on in the presentation. Some of the main factors reported that was linked to work-related stress, depression, or anxiety were increase in workload pressures, tough deadlines, additional responsibilities, and lack of support from their managers. Again, interestingly, the survey only indicated that COVID-19 did not appear to be a main driver of these changes. There's another study that the American Psychological Association conducted on work and well-being in 2021. They surveyed individuals who wanted to leave the current organization, and they found that 71% wanted to leave because they felt tense or stressed out during the workday. So 71% were thinking of leaving the organization because they're feeling stressed and tense where they were. 20% said that they don't typically feel tense or stressed out during the day. Job-related factors that impacted stress levels at work: low salaries, 56%, when in 2019, 49%. Too heavy of a workload, 50%. In 2019, it was 44%. Unrealistic job expectations, 48% in 2021, where it was 43% in 2019. The reason why I'm sharing this also is this is 2021, and now we're in 2022, not yet post-COVID, and we suspect that these numbers will be increasing as we go along. Involvement and communication-related factors that impact stress levels at work. 48% responded that lack of participation in decision making. This is autonomy. And in the study that in my study that I did for my thesis, autonomy ranked really high. There was a correlation with low autonomy and high levels of stress. Problems with my supervisor, 44%. Yeah, the impact of leadership on work-related stress. And problems with my co-workers, 43%. Okay? And all these are increasing from 2019, as you can see. I thought this was an interesting slide to share with you, right? The gray bar is respondents in the administrative, managerial, and professional or desk work. The blue bar is work that requires manual labor. And the red bar is work related to customer interaction, entertainment. DJ Okwari, I think you can see that very well. Sorry about that. Sales and so on. So the frequency of feelings at work in the past month, okay? So administrative, managerial, and professionals. Sorry, there seems to be an echo coming. 38%. So what this slide is saying is physical fatigue was felt mostly by people who experience manual labor and individuals who are, during having customer interactions, entertainment, and sales. And I think this is important, especially in the industry that you are in. The red bar is very significant. Cognitive weariness, this is fatigue again, like mental fatigue. People who are mentally tired, right? Again, the red bar is screaming at 44%, right? Emotional exhaustion, people who are just emotionally tired, right? Where they don't have any emotional or physical energy left in them. Again, the manual labor and the red bars are screaming out loud. Yeah? Mental health, high in the red bar again, and manual labor. Physical, again, red bar and the blue bars are showing strongly. And this was interesting. My employer provides its employees with adequate health insurance. And I think this is an area that we will be talking about a bit later in the presentation as well. But why I thought this slide was interesting is that in the industry that you are in, the red bars are screaming quite loud. And I thought this would be interesting information for you as you navigate this important topic of mental health at the workplace. Again, the blue bar is upper level employees. The green bar is mid-level employees. The red bar is frontline workers. And the black bar, these are your consultants, the individual contributors. So middle-level employees and frontline workers, as you see here, have experienced negative impacts of work-related stress in that past month. Yeah. Individuals on the right side have felt fed up quite frequently or more often in the past month. Again, frontline workers feature very high in this space. A bit on work-related stress. The International Labour Organization, ILO, acknowledges work-related stress as a global threat to workers' health and to the health of their organizations. This contributes to nearly 50% to 60% of absences at work. So correlation between work-related stress and absences. The ILO reports that excessively long work-related hours contribute to the deaths of 2.8 million workers every year. This is serious. Correlation between work-related stress and deaths. And in the US, sorry about that spell check, work is the leading cause of death. This is serious. So where are these deaths really coming from, work-related? Sometimes they come from maladaptive coping, substance use, addictions, and so on. Work-related stress is also linked to common mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, and substance use. There's also a correlation between work-related stress and physical health, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, certain cancers, and suicides. Some research, some information coming from our country. At a conference on mental health in Kenya, it was cited that 36% of work-related illnesses in Kenya were due to stress. The Task Force on Mental Health in Kenya found that at some point, 1 in 5 Kenyans will suffer from a mental illness in their lifetime. Furthermore, mental illness is a cost to our country, where it was responsible for 13% of the total disease burden, and at the same time, the budget allocation for mental health was less than 0.1%. When the task force went on the ground, Kenyans responded that apart from not having sufficient information on signs and symptoms of mental illness, and not knowing the difference between mental health, which is preventive, and mental illness, they were exposed to high levels of stress, where one group cited stress due to lack of employment, and another group citing that stress at the workplace, where their managers were responsible for their stresses. Again, leadership. So it took me on a journey, as I said, right? And because I find it very intriguing to work in this space, I decided to do some research in Kenya. And my title was The Prevalence of Work-Related Stress and Common Mental Health Disorders, a case of senior human resources professionals in Nairobi metropolis. And these were my findings. Stress levels were elevated at 88.6%, which means 88.6 individuals responded that they had some level of stress. I also found a correlation between stress and anxiety, a significant correlation, where 54.2% said that they were anxious. I also found a correlation between work-related stress and depression, and where 28 identified, 30 were clinically depressed, 28 identified that they were moderately depressed, 17 had severe depression, and 3 extreme depression. I also found correlation between work-related stress and substance use, and which is another substance use that is not here is sleeping pills. So a bit on work-related stress. Stress, according to the organization stress theory, happens when one experiences stress as a process and not a single event. So work-related stress actually occurs over time that builds up. The process actually involves how one evaluates and responds to stresses and how one attempts to cope with it. So it's really how individuals appraise it, how individuals see a certain thing as a stressor. So for example, someone may see change as stressful, but another individual experiencing the same change may not find it stressful. So it's really how individuals respond to some stresses that come their way. And when one is not able to cope with the stress coming their way, that's when the anxiety and stress and so on starts to kick in. So there are individual differences in how one cognitively appraises a stressor, which depends on the individual's capacity to cope. The psychological, physiological, and cultural characteristics that define the individual and the type of stressor. So what does this really mean? You'll find that some individuals are a lot more resilient than others. Maybe they're genetically inclined to be a lot more resilient. There could be some individuals who are not genetically inclined to be resilient. There could be certain individuals who, look highly functional, but they may have experienced traumas in their life. And there's a link between early trauma and, how we negatively respond to stressors. There could be co-occurring disorders. So for example, somebody is struggling with depression and which has not been diagnosed, they will find certain stresses coming their way a lot more stressful than other individuals who are not depressed. So there are many factors, that get triggered in workplace stress. Many say that it's not only the workplace that triggers the stress, but also on how individuals respond to stresses or the risks, psychological risks at the workplace. So when the type of stressor is beyond one's capacity to cope, it can sometimes lead to serious psychological and physical illnesses. A bit on burnout. So not too long ago, the World Health Organization finally included burnout in its international classification of diseases. This is their diagnostic manual. Burnout is identified as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions. Feelings of energy depletion or exhausted. These are individuals who just are fatigued and tired all the time, whether they're at work or outside the workplace. Increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. These are individuals who've emotionally disconnected themselves from work. They're at work, but they've disconnected. And when one gets disconnected, that's where the negativism about the workplace, the cynicism, the comments that come through are significant in the syndrome of burnout. And of course, performance also gets affected. So this definition is important because it now acknowledges that burnout is more than just an employee problem. It is also an organizational problem. A bit on how burnout happens. This is the stress arc. A certain level of stress is important because it motivates us, it drives us, and so on. And it's called eustress. So a certain amount of stress is important for peak performance. If there is no stress, that's when there's boredom and apathy and so on. So we do require some healthy stress to perform. But over time, when this stress is not managed, when we start feeling tired, when we find it hard to make decisions, when our mind feels foggy, when we're feeling exhausted and irritable and anxious, these are the signs to watch out that, I'm starting to feel burned out. So stress occurs when perceived pressure on an individual exceeds that person's ability to maintain resilience. They no longer have resources to cope. The 6 main causes of burnout, yes, workload. Perceived lack of control. When individuals feel they're no longer in control of the jobs that they do. When individuals feel that their job does no longer belong to them. There's no autonomy. They have no say in the work that they do. They are not consulted, right? lack of reward or recognition, poor relationships, lack of fairness, and when there's a values mismatch. So, for example, when somebody values family, but they're spending 16 to 17 hours at work, right? There's a values mismatch right there. A note here: millennials have the highest level of burnout. Yeah, millennials are those individuals, who are born between 1981 and 1996. These are the Gen Y. Yeah, and the reason why there's high levels of burnout in this age category is because they have lesser autonomy. Yeah, these are the young ones that have come into, the fairly young ones that have come into the workplace. Yeah, and they are being led by maybe the baby boomers or the Gen X, people born between 1946 and 1980, right? And because they don't feel like they have enough control or enough say, the whole burnout cycle starts to set in for them. Again, low seniority, and they have greater financial stresses as well. A lot of these Gen Ys thought that by the time they reach 24, 25, they've made it, only to realize that there's still a long way to go. Loneliness. And I came across some interesting research, not only for millennials, but loneliness is another huge trigger of stress and mental health at the workplace. Yeah? Individuals could be around their colleagues, but they're lonely inside, right? Because there's something missing in their lives. These are terms that I'd like you to start becoming comfortable with, especially in the age that we live in today. Technostress and telepressure. The amount of technology that is coming our way, not only at the workplace, but even when we are no longer at work, right? The social media, the emails that we now have access to the workplace 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Yeah, the technostress and the telepressure that's coming our way. And there's really interesting research that has come up on a correlation between technostress and telepressure and high stress levels at the workplace. Leadership. And here is an interesting data. 23.8 billion in the US is lost annually due to abusive supervision. Because there is a link between abusive supervision, absences, and mental health. The cost of mental health to individuals and organizations is huge, but I could only I'll only share with you a few nuggets. Absent workers cost employers around 150 billion US dollars per year. But those who came to work and were fully not productive, there's a word for it. It's called presenteeism. Presenteeism is individuals who are at the workplace but are struggling with mental health. And because they're struggling with mental health, they're not performing up to par. And that is a higher cost. Okay? And the cost in this case is 1,500 billion per year in the US, just by workers being at the workplace and not productive. They're present, but they're not productive because of mental health issues. A study conducted by the American Institute of Stress found that after including factors such as absenteeism, turnover, diminished productivity, increased medical costs, increased legal costs, and the total economic impact of stress to US employers was estimated at 300 billion annually. Another area that I would like to touch on is on stigma and culture. So the picture that I showed you earlier of the two individuals who are wearing that mask of, looking okay when really they're not okay deep inside. The main reason why individuals and especially employees in the workplace are hesitant to share that they're struggling emotionally or psychologically is because of the fear of how they might be seen, of the fear that they may lose their jobs. So I'd like to share with you the different types of stigma. There's the public stigma that involves the negative or discriminatory attitudes that others have about mental illness. Self-stigma refers to the negative attitudes, including internalized shame, that people with mental illness have about their own condition. Institutional stigma, it's more systemic, right? And involves policies of government and private organizations that intentionally or unintentionally limit opportunities for people with mental illness. So some examples include lower funding for mental illness research or fewer mental health services relative to other healthcare. So stigma not only directly affects individuals with mental illness, but also the loved ones who support us, who support them. Right? They say with mental illness, sometimes it's not only the individual that is struggling, whether it's depression, anxiety, substance use, but the people around this individual start to feel very helpless, right? And many don't even know how to support them. And so what starts to happen is everyone just starts to live in silence. I want to share with you a video, and I'd like you to think about this whole issue around stigma and culture. I don't know how many of you were around when, the Space Shuttle Challenger had an incident, and let me just share this with you.
It was a bitter cold but sparkling clear morning at Cape Canaveral. Here at the last seconds of the countdown. 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower. All the communications between the shuttle and mission control indicated everything was going fine. There was a sense of relief that the much-delayed flight was finally underway.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%. Challenger, go with throttle up. Challenger, go with throttle up.
It happened just over 1 minute into flight.
1 minute, 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
From mission control, silence. Then the bland, chilling report.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Slow motion. A search effort couldn't begin for some 15 minutes after this. Debris, they said, just kept raining from the sky. The head of the space shuttle program had no explanations, just sorrow at the tragedy.
At 11:40 a.m. this morning, space program experienced a national tragedy with the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger approximately a minute and a half after launch from here at the Kennedy Space Center.
Computer-enhanced video shows the explosion in detail. What explosion appears to have...
For those of you who are interested, you can catch this on YouTube. But they found something very interesting as they went into, the basement, basically, so to speak, of why this may have happened. And they found something very interesting. Yeah. So the space shuttle, you can imagine the amount of funding that went into just for this space shuttle to take off on their journey, right? But it disintegrated on 1st February 2003, killing 7 astronauts on board. investigations found that it really came down to decision-making and communication. The culture at that time at NASA was avoid saying something controversial and stay in your own lane. People were terrified of making mistakes. When they spoke up, their jobs were in jeopardy. So they stopped speaking up. And if you go deeper into, when I went deeper into this, this article, what they found was they were in silos and they would not involve the technical and engineers. The technicals and the engineers didn't really have a space at that table. Yeah, so they were feeling left out. And so after that, they had to review the culture at NASA. So you can imagine in an environment where you are terrified of making mistakes, you're scared of speaking up, how then do you expect individuals today in our organizations to speak about mental illness when there is a culture like this? But let's bring it closer to home. Yeah? How many of us remember this? The Ethiopian, let me share this video with you.
Ethiopian Airlines flew passengers on a Boeing 737 MAX plane on Tuesday, but opinions are split regarding its first flight using the model since a crash nearly 3 years ago. In March 2019, a flight to Nairobi crashed 6 minutes after takeoff from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, killing all 157 passengers and crew. The accident followed another incident 5 months earlier when the same model crashed in Indonesia, killing 189 people. The accidents exposed a problem with the system on the plane, and the model was grounded worldwide, costing Boeing some $20 billion. Some relatives of those killed in the Ethiopian Airlines crash were angered by the decision to resume flying the MAX. Tom Cabao lost his 29-year-old brother George in the crash.
Personally, it's a decision that I will never fly in a MAX. And certainly, if I find myself booked into a MAX, I'll have to cancel that flight.
Tuesday's demonstration flight had journalists, diplomats and officials on board and was initially scheduled to reach neighbouring Kenya. However, it remained within Ethiopia due to poor weather, officials on board said. Ethiopian Airlines said the decision to resume flights came, quote, after intense recertification.
So I actually had a good friend who lost her father during this crash.
Ethiopian Airlines.
I don't know how many of you watched, and you can actually watch it on Netflix. It's called Downfall, and it's about the downfall of Boeing and how they put profit before safety as being one of the main reasons of the MAX 737, falling from the skies, and how the culture at Boeing led to this downfall. Right? So much money being put into initiatives, but if the culture is not right, if the culture is not enabling, how do we expect to win as an organization or as a company? Yeah. And I strongly urge you to watch, the documentary called Downfall on Netflix. It'll tell you the Boeing story and the culture, and how, because they got a new leader, who put profit before safety, how that started to lead to the downfall of Boeing. And today, by the way, Airbus has a larger market share than Boeing. Yeah. So this is a very, this is like almost the gold standard model of work-related stress. It's called the Palmer, Cooper, and Thomas model of work stress. And you can see here that it's culture. Yeah? Culture really defines what happens to individuals in the workplace. So for example, job demands. Are individuals able to cope with the demands on the job? Do individuals have a sense of control on their job? Is there enough support? Do they know what their roles really are? What are the relationships like in the organization? How is change managed in these organizations? And these directly impact employees. And when the culture is not right, it leads to individual symptoms. High blood pressure affects sleep, gastrointestinal disturbance. These are the stomach issues, the nausea, the IBS, all stomach-related issues. Increased intake of alcohol and caffeine, increased irritability and negative emotions, back pain, tension, palpitations, headaches. Yeah? And these eventually lead to diseases such as coronary heart disease, respiratory diseases, depression and anxiety, and burnout. At the organization level, when this is not managed, increased sickness and absences, a culture of long hours, increased staff turnover, reduced staff performance, reduced staff morale and loyalty, increased hostility, right? And the result, increased overheads, reduced profits, increased accidents, and increased litigation. So just look at the power culture has on the success of an organization through its people. There's this whole thing about psychological safety. Yeah. So what really is psychological safety? Okay. It really is the foundation of inclusion and team performance, and the key to creating an innovative culture as well. Really, it's psychological safety really feels like I feel I'm included. Even if it's for a moment, I felt included. Psychological safety is where there's an environment where it's safe to learn, and it's okay to sometimes make those mistakes, right? It's an environment where it's safe to contribute. It's safe to challenge the status quo without fear of being embarrassed, marginalized, or punished in some way. So this is really a key part of an adaptive culture in organizations. So what are some of the workers that we see struggling with mental health issues? When a worker comes into an organization, they look motivated, they look excited, they're looking forward, they're making the effort. You see their performance, being fairly good initially. But how often do we really look around or even think about ourselves, that what is really happening? So some of the signs of workers struggling with mental health issues, when you find that there are changes in work habits, so for example, lack of motivation, if the errors are increasing, right? There's lack of focus. This individual is looking distracted. And of course, decreased productivity. Behavioral changes, moods, restlessness, irritability, anger. And sometimes this, behavioral changes like to the extent of even incivility, right? Are some of the signs that some of these workers may be struggling with mental health issues. Frequent absences from work, of course, and recurring complaints of physical symptoms, for example, fatigue, people feeling tired all the time, insomnia, not sleeping well, headaches, abdominal distress, nausea, pain, change in weight. And the reason why you find that abdominal distress is very linked to stress is because, a lot of the neurons that are in our brain, we have neurons in our stomach as well, especially the feel-good neurons of serotonin. There are more serotonin neurons in our stomach than there are in our brain, right? That's why what we eat is so important in managing stress. This model, the health and safety executive model of work stress, is actually the gold standard of work-related stress, where they have a lot of organizations, especially in the UK, use this standard to inculcate it in their culture. Yeah, and very similar to the Palmer-Cooper model that I shared with you. The HSC also delivers a program on how to audit, how to assess, and what strategies and interventions to put in place to manage stress at the workplace. So the reason why I'm sharing with you this is that there are models that we can work with. So the HSC recommended a 5-step risk assessment that focuses on assessing and then addressing major hazards at the workplace. Culture, of course, right? The culture of the organization and how it deals with stress. The demands, exposure to physical hazards and workload, for example, volume and complexity of work, shift work for many. Control, employee involvement with how they do their work, right? Do people feel like I am in control? Relationships include work relationships, and if there is incivility at the workplace, for example, bullying and harassment, of course that impacts, work-related stress. How is change managed in the organization? The role, sometimes we give individuals job descriptions, but are they clear? And studies have shown that when we give individuals job descriptions that are not clear, that is a risk factor for psychological stress. Because a job description should be fairly simple and easy to understand, so that employees know this is what my role really is. Yeah. And is there enough support from peers, the line managers? Is there enough training? I wanted to share this with you. It's a LinkedIn study on what they found on global trends in 2022. What people are really asking for, and by the way, remember these are global trends, and there's no way us as Kenyans we're isolated from this. What individuals are asking for is a human-centric company, a company that puts human beings at the center of its strategy. What does this imply? Is there flexibility, right? For example, is it okay if is it okay for organizations to say, okay, we can have a hybrid type of workplace? Is there diversity? Yeah, whether it's gender, whether it's physical disabilities, whether it's mental illness, whether it's ethnicity, which is a huge conversation in our country. Yeah. Are we open to this diversity? Is there trust? And what does trust really look like? Because trust is a construct that means different things to different individuals. But what does trust really look like in this organization? People want to feel like they belong, right? When there's a sense of belonging, and there's really interesting work that is being done on a sense of belonging and mental health. And really having a holistic focus on well-being. So the percentage of professionals selecting these as top priorities when picking a new job, 63% responded that work-life balance is important. 60% compensation and benefits. And this, we all know that, globally, many countries are facing inflation. I think our current inflation rates in Kenya is, I think you're the better experts if anyone knows better. The last time I checked was 7.9%. You know, when CBK actually has a range of between what 2.5% to 7.5%, so we've overshot that. Right? So the prices of food in our country, transport, housing, utilities has all gone up, but maybe our compensation has not matched that. So how are people really feeling? You know, worried, anxious, stressed. And compensation and benefits is an important factor to look at as far as mental health at the workplace is concerned. 40% responded that the colleagues and the culture at their workplace is a priority. You know, we may see numbers like less than 50%, but that doesn't mean it is significant. If 40% said that this is important, it is significant. The group suggested that top areas to invest in to improve company culture. 59% responded that professional development opportunities was important. This whole aspect of the need to grow in their careers and as individuals. 48% responded that flexible work support was important. 42% responded that mental health and wellness at the workplace is important. 35% responded that it is important to train managers. And 26% said that diversity and inclusion is important at the workplace. So, as I come to the last few slides of my presentation, it requires for all of us to rethink that this is a different normal, a very, very different normal. And if I go by the famous saying of, Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here will not get you there. It really requires us to really sit and have a good rethink about how can we make mental health and well-being a competitive advantage for us in our organization. Because the data speaks for itself. The studies speak for itself. And we can no longer ignore mental health at the workplace. So to stay ahead of the game, it is important that we make mental health our competitive advantage. And to do that, we need to actually throw away some of the old ways that we are looking at employee well-being and rewrite the script again. These are just some of my references. Yeah. So, MC Okari, are you there? MC? Is anyone out there?
Yes, we can hear you, Tazmin.
Okay, so I'm done. Thank you. I'm okay to take questions if there are any, since we have some time.
I think I can ask a question as we wait for MC Okari. First of all, to say that was a very, very excellent presentation. It has opened up our minds.
Typing on the charts.
And just to ask, what does it take to make employees the center of our focus. Having seen what it costs not to do so, what can organizations do? What can managers do? What can leaders do? I think that's the question I have, Tazmin. Thank you.
Yeah. So there is a lot that we can do, and there's a lot happening in organizations, especially in the West. Yeah. And there are a lot of tools that we can start working with, right? It really starts with having leadership at the table to make this a strategic intent. Yeah, it starts there. Unless there is buy-in at the top, then it's just going to be rhetoric on mental illness, right? How do you embed it in your policies and procedures? You know, how do you assess what is currently happening? How can we audit what is currently happening in terms of mental health in organizations? And where are the gaps, right? It's really how do we make it a strategic intent? And there are ways of doing it. There are ways of doing it. And that's a whole different conversation on ways of doing it. Yeah. So to answer your question, there is a loaded answer. In future, if there is an opportunity, I can share with you what are some of the ways. We do have certain tools that we can start working with as well. It's about taking that first step. And unless we take that first step in starting to make this a strategic intent and start having the conversations and normalizing mental health, you know, moving away from the stigma and saying it's okay. It's okay to talk about it. Yeah. That's the start. Any other questions?
I am looking at the chat and I'm checking on some of the questions on the chat. If you allow me, Tazmin, I can read some for you.
Yes.
Okay. I saw earlier somebody by the name Lina Mbithe had done a question. How does trauma manifest in the workplace?
How does trauma manifest in the workplace?
Yes.
Okay. So let me share with you my experience as a coach and where the traumas, sometimes we carry early traumas to our workplace, right? Traumas such as, okay, so trauma is, let me give you a bit of a landscape of trauma. Trauma is not only when we personally experience trauma, but when we also witness trauma, okay? So individuals who have grown up in an environment, for example, where there's been domestic violence or sexual abuse, yeah. Let me share with you that sometimes even executives who come for coaching, you know, for example, women have been sexually abused by their houseboy earlier on in their lives, right? Or there's some cultural elements that, you know, that later on in life people realize, oh my God, I was actually sexually abused, right? Domestic violence, individuals who've been in accidents and so on. Okay, so some people carry these traumas to the workplace, but sometimes the workplace itself can be a traumatic experience, right? When the workplace is toxic, when there's abuse, because there's a link between any kind of abuse and trauma, whether the abuse is physical or emotional. In itself, it triggers. The person experiences a traumatic experience, right? So there is a link between a toxic workplace and trauma, and that's why some of the experiences that individuals have in the workplace that are traumatic, then they end up coping with things like alcohol, smoking, unhealthy eating habits, lack of sleep, and these are all signs of trauma. Yeah? So two parts here. Sometimes we are susceptible already to trauma by the time we come in the workplace, and that's why with even the slightest stresses, we tend to be a lot more stressed if we already have previous trauma. And sometimes the workplace itself starts to be traumatic, right? So I'll give you an example. Very earlier on, when I was doing my my internship, I had this individual who actually worked, a Kenyan, who worked in logistics, in Afghanistan, right? And he was showing high levels of trauma. Now, that logistics was a job for him. And when he went to share with me what he experienced at the workplace, at his job in logistics in Afghanistan, he shared how he saw a helicopter landing, right? And some of his colleagues were in the same place as the helicopter landing, and the chopper, the propellers actually slashed three of individuals to death, and he observed this. So now, isn't that an example? Now, that is an extreme case of trauma at the workplace, right? This is somebody who witnessed it. So trauma doesn't just happen when you yourself are experiencing it, but your trauma also happens when when you see it, when you witness it. And we're hearing so much of it in the news. I mean, just today, look at that accident that happened, right? How many people lost their lives? How many people lost their lives? This paper is in front of me, in Nithi Bridge. Now, when we're also reading, the media, all these events eventually, we take it into our subconscious, right? So the media also plays a huge role in how we experience trauma. So yes, the workplace sometimes can also be a cause for trauma. Next question.
Thank you for that elaborate answer. I think 2-3 people are asking here whether we'll get the soft copy of those notes, which I believe we will.
Yes,
Tazmin, you can confirm.
I'll send you the notes. Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then I can see Cynthia. In Kenyan law, can an employee sue an employer if they feel that their mental health rights have been violated?
Okay, I can't answer that question yet, but I know there's a lot of, not to my knowledge, but I know there's a lot of chatter around making mental health, taking mental health to the next level in our country. Yeah, to my understanding, I don't think we've reached there yet. I'm not aware of many countries out there that that this is the case, but allow me to do some research on it, and if I do get a few answers, I will respond, and you can share it to the group.
Thank you for that response. Thank you very much for that. I have not seen any hand that has been raised so far. It means that we are getting the answers and the presentation has been superb. I have seen Mbide Lina saying, thank you, Tazmin. That was well answered. So with no more questions on the floor, I will allow you now to make the final remarks and maybe a parting shot before we can conclude on that first presentation.
Okay, so you want me to make a final remark and a parting shot?
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So the final remarks and a parting shot is, I think it's obvious, right? That we can no longer overlook as individuals, right? Whether it's in our families or whether it's in organizations, we can no longer overlook how serious mental health issues really are. We can no longer overlook it, because not only does it impact organizations, but it impacts us as individuals, it impacts our families, it impacts our communities, it impacts the country, because it comes with a cost. Yeah? So my parting shot is that we can no longer overlook it. Yeah. That's it.
We can no longer overlook it. Very important. Thank you so much for the presentation, Tazmin. It's always an honor and privilege to have you on board, and thank you for the elaborate presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you for being with us through that first part of the presentation. We now welcome you to enjoy with us as we head into the next part of our presentation, which will be presented to us by Angela Obwaka. In brief, Angela is also called Angie. You know, they call Angie. And Angie is an HR consultant and a champion of excellence at both individual and organization levels. She is passionate about empowering people in their gifting and aligning them to spaces that allow them to flourish. With a background in academia, she taught management, HR, and international business related units at a private university in South Africa and conducted research in the same area. She continually determined to create spaces in which people feel supported and valued in their workplace. Her research was specifically focused in bridging the gap between management research and practice, insight which she continually leverages in her current engagements. She most recently served as the head of people and culture HR in an international NGO where she led over 100 staff across 17 countries in leading the implementation, review, and development of HR policies and practices. Angie currently runs a consultancy firm through which she offers individual and corporate HR solutions, including CV revamps. CV revamps, I know 99% of you would, based on Tazmin's research, will be looking at a CV revamp. You know where to find Angie. Career coaching, team building, strategy development, organizational audits, and needs analysis, succession planning, change management, HR administration, among others. She also regularly involved in training needs engagements with diverse institutions and teams. Complementarily, she holds a strong digital presence with good influence and reach on social media where she shares her family, faith, career lessons regularly. She also runs a weekly segment on her Instagram page called HR Tuesdays and has a YouTube channel where she advises or answers HR queries and shares opportunities and information with her followers who vary in age, career development stages, and geographical location. I'm sure by the end of the presentation, she will have shared the same links to us so that we are able to join the following team and become big fans as always. With a strong academic and professional background in human resource management and strategic management, teaching and facilitation, training and capacity building, public speaking and engagement for transformation, her training complements her vast business relationship in public and private sector in the region. Indeed, we have one of the very best in this field speaking to us today in the most precise and best terms she can find. So at this juncture, it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome Angie so that she's able to take over in the session. Angie, karibu sana.
Asante sana. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
We can hear you loud and clear, and sweetly we can confirm that.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I think when you'd gotten like halfway, you're starting to feel a bit sheepish. Some of those introductions can create very high expectations, and hopefully I'll be able to match those expectations. Thank you so much for having me. I am grateful to be here, very grateful to have this time with you all. Thank you so much, Tazmin, for your session. I really, really enjoyed it. It was very insightful for me, especially as an HR practitioner, just thinking about new and different ways in which we can better serve the people that we work with, because at the end of the day, people are our greatest asset in the workplace. So thank you so much for that. I'm having a bit of issue with my camera, which I was trying to fix as Tazmin was speaking. So I'm not going to turn my camera on at this point, but hopefully if it does decide to work with us, then we'll continue, but we will not be held hostage. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, I confirm that we can see them.
Fantastic. All right. So today I have been invited to contribute to this conversation, focusing specifically on emotional intelligence and your career as it contributes to staff wellness in the workplace. So as I thought about, similar to Tazmin, as I thought about everything we could talk about emotional intelligence, I thought that we will narrow it down to what is emotional intelligence and linking it to how you can leverage emotional intelligence for your career. And I hope that this is going to be a wonderful time together. I think you can already hear from my voice that I am not as tempered as Tazmin. I was listening to her speak and I was like, wow, I want one day when I grow up, I want to be able to speak with really good like cadence in my speech and just a sense of calm. And clearly she's the psychologist between the two of us. I'm a little bit more animated, and I hope that everyone listening will appreciate, I guess, different sides of the coin this morning. So some people might be wondering why the image that I have throughout these slides is this sort of like network of like a web. It looks like a web, if you can see from the title slide. It's because this whole conversation around emotion sometimes can feel like some very ethereal type of notion. When we talk about emotional intelligence, talk about mental health, it's sort of like, what exactly are we talking about? How do we navigate? It's like neurons somewhere firing somewhere. How does it interact with my work? What's the place for emotions in the workplace? But hopefully, as we come to the end, it will all be able to be pieced together for you. I see my slides have not changed in order, so I will start with my introduction. MC Okai did a great job in reading out my profile, but simply put, now that you can't see my face, these are pictures of me in different situations. I am always smiling. If you've ever seen me or heard me speak anywhere, I am always smiling. I am grateful for the gift of optimism, which I carry a lot of. I am an HR consultant and career coach. I have a background in HR, a background in strategic management, and currently pursuing a second graduate degree in missions. My area of passion and expertise is in HR solutions. So in my firm, we offer HR solutions to individuals and to organizations, whether it is something as simple as CV revamp, to interview preparation, all the way to creating new cultures and troubleshooting in the organization, because I am equally as passionate to individuals to be able to help them to thrive in their career and to get themselves in the right place for themselves, but also to create organizations that are able to sustain and create a good environment, like Tazmin spoke about, environments where people are able to flourish in their giftings, in their talents, are feeling supported and are feeling balanced in terms of their mental well-being, but also in their careers. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I have a wonderful team that helps me deliver that. One of the things that I will say before I continue with this presentation is that I have this incredible gift. We have it in our family where we speak really fast. It is a gift. I don't know. Everybody does it except my dad. And if at any point in time you feel like you are listening slowly, that is not happening. I am speaking fast. And so please feel free to jump in and ask a question either in the chat or raise your hand and be like, listen, you left us like 2 slides ago, or I'm not really clear about what you're saying. I don't know if it's maybe our ancestors who are night runners, and because in this day and age, we're not doing any night running, we now run through our words and through our speech. And so because I'm aware of it, many times I will pause myself, I'll slow myself down, but usually when I get really excited and eager, then I can start speaking a bit fast. So it's not a you problem, it's a me problem. I'm aware of it. Feel free to jump in at any point and, just ask for clarification or ask a question in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to serve you in that way in going back and clarifying, because this session is for you, not just for me to speak endlessly. All right. So one of the thought leaders in the area of emotional intelligence, his name is Daniel Goleman, and he's done a lot of research, and a lot of the publications that even modern day research has on emotional intelligence is based off of his original work. And one of the things that he says in his book is people with well-developed emotional skills are also more likely to be content and effective in their lives, mastering the habits of mind that foster their own productivity. On the other hand, people who cannot marshal some control over their emotional life fight inner battles that sabotage their ability for focused work and clear thought. Okay, so simply put, he's saying that this thing about emotions is not a far off thing. You know, for a very long time, especially like in the field of HR, like when you think about 50 years ago, people thought about employees as being like any other machinery. The same way I have table, I have chairs, I have machines. That's exactly how human beings should be. So we talk about human capital, not in the way that we do now, but back then it was literally people are just like any other machinery. So we don't care about their feelings. We don't care about what is going on within them. Over time, of course, that evolved and we came into a season of organizational behavior. And now it became more important. We realized that people actually have feelings, and those feelings, no matter how much we don't want to deal with them, those feelings still come into the workplace, and we have to be able to manage those feelings. But more and more, even coming to today, we realize, I think just the fantastic presentation that Tazmin had, which I'll keep referencing, the whole issue about mental health and the statistics there, just talking about not just people losing ability for focused work or clear thought, but people losing their lives, people losing their livelihood, people losing their place in society, their ability to function. It's no longer just okay, people have emotions and people have feelings and people have those things, and we need to sort of create a good environment for them, but how best do we support people? Okay, and a lot of the presentation that you've heard previously is about how organizations can create that environment. And in my presentation, I want to focus on you as an individual. How do you use your own emotions and the understanding of your own well-being and what that looks like for you to be able to advance your career, or to be able to give you an edge or give you a competitive advantage in the workplace? So my agenda for this morning, morning going into afternoon, starting with my introduction, which I've done, then we'll look at a brief definition of emotional intelligence, and then we'll unpack what emotional intelligence is, what are the different elements of it, and then we'll look at emotional intelligence and your career and how you can communicate your strengths in emotional intelligence, or even be able to leverage the emotional intelligence that you have, or the strengths you have in emotional intelligence, or even identify places where you do need to grow and how you would be able to invest in yourself so that your career is well positioned and you continue to grow in your career path, leveraging on the emotions that you have. And then at the end, you know, I'll open it up for question and answers. But if you do have a question as we are going on, please feel free to put in the chat, because sometimes when we say we'll save the Q&A for the end, then you forget this burning question as we're going on, and we don't want to miss any of that. Okay. So this slide here, well, there's a meme there where somebody is having a conversation with their colleague, and this person is saying to the other person, every time I get over my hate for you at work, you do something new that makes me want to push you in front of a bus. And I don't know how many of us have had those moments. Maybe your colleagues are on this platform in this meeting, so you don't want to really say that out loud because people might start feeling some type of way towards you. But it is normal. It is normal for you to have strong feelings at work, for you to experience a lot of emotion. I think Tazmin talked about that in the West they spend about 55% of their waking hours at work. I think I saw a recent study that said about 70% of your lifetime will be spent at work, whether it is in, you know, being employed or in your business if you're in entrepreneurship or whatever gainful work that you're doing. So about 70% of your life will be spent working. And in that time, of course, you'll meet people of different backgrounds, different persuasions, personalities, etc. And they will rub you different ways. And so that feeling might be one that you have right now towards a colleague, or maybe that you had last week, who knows. But the other pictures on the right here, there's a lady here you can see, I don't know if you can see that clearly, who is, she has a tear coming down her face. There's a man here who is raging and yelling at somebody on the other side. There's a lady here who, from her facial expression, we can see has a look of disgust, or she's sneering, or she's irked by something. And many times when we talk about emotional intelligence, or when I have conversations with people about emotional intelligence, people are usually very quick to point out other people who are not emotionally intelligent. You know, so you think back to a colleague who yelled at a client, or you think about a boss who has no discretion in terms of maybe the things that they say or how they're unsupportive, or you think about somebody in the office who is always gossiping, or one thing or the other. I'm not sure where my presentation has gone. I think there's somebody else who's sharing their screen. Can you still see my presentation?
No, we cannot see.
Oh, okay. I think somebody is sharing their screen, and so I think it bumped me off. I'm not sure if Ian can help me with that.
Miriam can. Our guest, Miriam.
No, we can't.
Our guest, Miriam and Marianne.
Angela, you can try sharing again.
Okay, let me do that. But anyway, as I try and get the presentation back up, many times when we think about emotional intelligence or conversations, we're very quick to point out situations where somebody hasn't done it well, or people that you can think about. And many people would very quickly say, no, I think I have emotional intelligence. I think I'm doing pretty great in the area of emotional intelligence. I feel like I don't yell at anyone in the workplace. I don't lose my cool. But usually we don't see ourselves. Okay, I think okay, it's coming up. We don't see ourselves. And, you know, towards the end of this session, I will be challenging you to go and seek feedback from your family members, from your close friends, from colleagues, and even looking through reviews that you have gotten at work, because they're always growth points. They're always places where we can do things better. And in some situations, if you remember the slide that was on, like where somebody was crying and somebody was shouting, somebody else was looking irked by a particular situation, there's sometimes where those responses and seeing somebody crying or seeing somebody yelling is actually a demonstration of emotional intelligence, depending obviously on where this emotional intelligence is being displayed or is being demonstrated. So emotional intelligence is not just about being able to hide an emotion, or not being able to communicate that emotion, or being authentic in that particular space, but it's really about being able to identify, being able to identify emotions that you have or emotions that other people have, and leveraging those for your benefit. Okay, our presentation is back up. Great. Okay. So those are not necessarily images of poor emotional intelligence. So now that that's said, let's look at our definition here that we have for emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is the type of intelligence defined as an ability to regulate emotions in order to facilitate measured action. Okay, an ability to regulate emotions. And when we talk about regulating emotions, it's regulating emotions within yourself, but also regulating emotions within other people or the people around you, in order to facilitate measured actions. When we talk about measured actions, we're talking about having, using those emotions and understanding those emotions, regulating them, and then being able to decide what is the appropriate course of action based on rational thinking, not based on reactive thinking, not based on I'm carrying emotions from this other situation and it's sort of infiltrating how I'm going to make decisions going forward, but being able to regulate personal emotions and emotions in other people to be able to facilitate measured actions. And we're going to look very practically at what that looks like within oneself and within other people. So there are 5 main facets that we talk about in regards to emotional intelligence. Different authors and different researchers will categorize these differently. So they might speak about 4 main brackets or divide it into 2. So they'll talk about interpersonal intrapersonal, so stuff to do within yourself, and then interpersonal, and then that's related to other people. But all of these usually fall, they layer up quite well. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive in terms of how people will present it, but this is usually the clearest one that I've found and appreciate in terms of sharing. So in this unpacking emotional intelligence, there are 5 main elements that we would look at, and these 5 elements have to do with dealing with other people and dealing with self. So in this particular slide that you have, right in the middle, you have self-awareness. Everything to the right of self-awareness has to do with you as an individual, how your own emotions affect yourself and would in this particular case affect your career. And then to the left of this, the social skill and the empathy have to do with your emotional intelligence as regards other people. Okay. And so let's unpack some of those. The first element of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. So self-awareness has to do with your ability to identify your emotions, okay? And as we talk through these things, don't think about a colleague, don't think about someone who should be here. Think about yourself and think about areas where you're struggling or areas where it has become difficult for you to do these things. And of course, there could be external reasons why you're not being able to be self-aware. I mean, Tazmin talked about things like burnout or trauma or being in a state of emotional distress might cause you to not be so self-aware in particular situations or particular seasons. So the first element or the lowest level of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Are you able to identify emotions? So as you're going through your day, as you're going through a week, are you able to identify periods where you're angry, periods where you're excited, things that you enjoy? You know, can you identify delight? Can you identify pain? Can you identify, and all of these things, not in other people, but in yourself? Okay, are you able to identify that feeling? Sometimes people will come into conversations, and I'm sure you probably can identify a colleague or a friend who will come and tell you, oh, I don't really know how I'm feeling. So you're really trying to dig in deep to try and figure out, okay, so are you feeling happy? Are you feeling sad? Is it that, you know, what exactly has happened? Okay, so what exactly is it that you're feeling? Is it a positive emotion or negative emotion? So self-awareness is the lowest level of emotional intelligence, which is foundational for you to be able to grow in this particular thing. So that's number one. The second step is self-regulation or self-management. And self-regulation has to do, like the word suggests, with you being able to not just identify an emotion, but being able to not let that emotion override your ability to function, okay? So say, for example, you identify that you're angry. Somebody who is able to self-regulate will, just because I'm angry, I will not break everything in my house. I will not trash the office computers because I'm angry, because I have some measure of self-regulation. So self-regulation is all about, can I identify negative emotions that I am feeling, whether it's pain, it's hurt, it's anger, it's disappointment, it's anything on that particular spectrum, and can I be able to self-regulate to be able to continue to function? All right. And when I say self-regulate, it's also not saying that those things are bad, because part of emotional intelligence is identifying that emotions point to a place where there's a problem. You might be really angry at work because something has happened. You have been harassed at work. You have been overlooked for a particular opportunity. You have been disrespected at work. And so you're feeling angry. So the emotion there is you're regulating your response to a particular situation, but you're also paying attention to, oh, I'm feeling angry every single time I'm in a meeting with so-and-so. I always come out feeling angry. Okay, so now with my self-regulation, one, I don't just punch them in the office, but secondly, I'm able to look at, okay, so what exactly is it about my encounter with this person that led me to this emotion? Because of course you don't want to continue or to persist in the place of negative emotion. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So it's identifying the source of that emotion, that negative emotion, and then being able to stop that emotion from overriding your rational thinking. Okay, you might start feeling at work feelings of disappointment or feelings of hopelessness, for example, and then, but you know, so instead of you going to the destructive route of, jumping into destructive habits of addiction and corruption, and so now you start to steal money from the organization because you're feeling disappointed or you're feeling hopeless, maybe because you are at a career plateau or you're not feeling like you're growing, identifying, okay, I'm feeling this. I will not let this be the dictator of my actions. I will try and investigate, why am I feeling this? Maybe I'm feeling this because I feel like I haven't grown. In the last 3, 4, 5 years, I see people that I got into the organization with, they're advanced. We all entered as sales executives, and some people are now regional managers. Other people have now been sent or have been transferred to different departments. Others have moved to other organizations. And I feel like I am stuck in this particular place. Okay, so I'm feeling these things. So I can trace the source of it, but also I will, because I know what the source of it is, I will make a conscious decision to not let it impact me negatively in terms of what I am going to do next. Okay, so that's the second level. So we started with self-awareness, and then we moved on to self-regulation. Then the third level, which is the third, is this an octagon? I think we'd call it an octagon. The third octagon there, that's red, talking about motivation. So that's the third level of emotional intelligence, is about motivation. And motivation is similar, but a slightly more advanced level of self-regulation. This is being able to harness or conjure up within yourself positive emotions to get you to be able to do things. Okay, so when you talk about being able to show up to work, being able to be optimistic, being able to continue in a path. So maybe there's a season at work where you're really going hard for a couple of weeks because maybe you're in the finance department and now it's time for audit. And so you know that over the next 2-3 weeks, over a month, you really have to spend late hours in the workplace. You have to do these different things. And so there's an amount of resilience, there's an amount of positive energy, which will not be infused to you from anywhere else. You need to be able to harness positive emotions from within yourself, or to sum up those positive emotions in order for you to achieve your goals and your actions. Okay, so it's not enough for you to just identify what you're feeling or regulate what you're feeling. You also need to, for you to be able to progress in life, for you to be able to progress specifically in your career, you need to be able to identify how do I get myself excited about the things that I need to do? How do I get myself excited about what I need to engage in? If I need to go and see clients, what is it? Maybe I need to just get coffee because maybe you identified within yourself that it's that you are not energetic this particular week. Whatever it is, being able to identify and conjure up positive emotions. For some people, it is a lot more difficult to have intrinsic motivators. And that's okay, as long as you can be able to identify where can you get that motivation. For some people, it's also understanding what is it that motivates you, what is it that drives you. So maybe you have a high need for affirmation, you have a high need for achievement, you have a high need for recognition, so being able to communicate that to your team members or be in roles where that is something that's celebrated for you. Maybe it's, if we're looking at a different theory, if we're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, maybe there's certain things in terms of job security, in terms of income that are not being met for you, and therefore you need to address that because that will directly impact your motivation. Okay, and then the fourth level from that, now we're looking at the left side of this diagram, is empathy. Okay, so everything point 1 to 3 have all been about me, myself, and I, self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation. But then now we move on to other people because we're not functioning as islands, we're not functioning in isolation. We have to interact with other people, and especially for career development, there's no way, unless even if you're working for yourself, you still have to serve clients who are external to your own being. You have to deal with suppliers or vendors or other service providers. So empathy is being able to identify other people's emotions. Okay, you've been in situations possibly where somebody has responded wrongly to a situation. Things like and we can identify this very easily in leaders. So leaders who are not sensitive to maybe somebody is going through a difficult time at work. I've been in situations where we've been called in because I think recently, one of the more recent clients that I had, we were trying to figure out how to support mothers who lose children before. So mothers who are expectant and then they undergo miscarriages, those whose children, they give birth, there's stillbirth in the delivery process, and those kinds of things, those difficult sort of moments. There have been situations in the past where I've known about leaders who are just like, well, you didn't have a baby anyway, so come back to work. There's nothing you're doing at home anyway. And you wouldn't imagine, like in your right mind, you didn't think that those words could come out of someone's mouth, but they did, not just to one employee, but to a number of employees. And that, I think that, I guess, correlates to this toxic mental state that people can be in a workplace. But that demonstrates a lack of empathy, the inability to identify an emotion that somebody else is going through and be able to be compassionate towards them in that particular space. Okay, it doesn't even have to be as dramatic as somebody losing their child or a death situation. It could be that somebody's just having a difficult week. It could be that somebody has failed dismally on a particular, like with a particular client. It could be somebody's client has dropped them. Just being able to be empathetic to this particular person or to particular individuals, that's the next level of emotional intelligence. Are you able to identify emotions that people are going through or people have, and are you able to be compassionate towards them? Whether it's in, is this the right time for us to have this meeting? Is this the right time for us to discuss this particular thing? Or is it for me to send you more work or whatever it is? And then lastly, the highest level, once you've built up all these different things, is being able to not just identify the emotions of others or being able to be compassionate, but is being able to impact. All right. So you're able to affect other people's emotions. So you're able to take your emotions. So if you're in a place of emotional wellness or a particular emotional state, being able to infuse that in other people. And many leaders, especially people who are leaders in explicit leadership positions or people who work with a team that they are maybe just part of, you usually find there's a particular person, like their confidence, their courage, their ability to believe in themselves and the ability to communicate that belief in themselves and in other people changes people's emotions and emotional state. It's also the place where you are able to harness other people's emotions. You realize, okay, when this person is in this particular state or people are feeling this way, I can be able to tap into that. Maybe it's a client that you're working with. Maybe it's a place where the client is feeling, maybe this example is not good because it might sound a bit exploitative. I think you can think about situations where, depending on how you realize the client or a particular person that you're dealing with is, it can be easier or harder for you to be able to build relationships, or easier or harder for you to build networking opportunities or network relationships. So how well do you handle other people's emotions in a way that can now benefit not just you, because it's not you're not trying to exploit the other person, but for you to create a win-win situation. So somebody can be able to draw from you, whether it's strength, draw from you insight or advice, or you can just be there to be able to listen and give effective feedback, give constructive criticism, and those things. Being able to give feedback, being able to listen effectively, being able to give good feedback is all part of how we build relationships, how we build connections with other people. So I hope those are clear. And if you are truly honest with yourself, you can be able to already start to see places where you could do better. And especially, I tell people the career journey is very similar to relationships, personal relationships or intimate relationships that you'd have with very close friends or even your partner, your spouse. It's usually very reflective, so there are things that you've been told often, that you never listen, you're just not in tune with my feelings. It could be your children, it could be family members, but there are always places where you could do better. It could be in the place of empathy. It could be in the place of self-regulation. Everybody knows as soon as you start to, you haven't eaten for a few hours, then you start to lash out at people. I mean, that shows very poor self-regulation, and that can be translated to many other areas in your career. I hope we're together to that point. And then the next thing I just want to touch on, because I feel like that all of this was just foundational elements, and hopefully there's stuff that you've gotten there. But I really want to talk about emotional intelligence and your career, because hopefully to this point you've been able to see the value of emotions in the place, in the work place. But then being able to, you as an individual, how do you personally leverage emotional intelligence for your career development? And I broke this down into 4 main areas. Okay, so usually when I meet people, they are somewhere, either they're applying for a new job or they've just got into a new job, but they want to get their CV ready to the next level. And then you have interviews where you have to actually confirm that everything that's on paper, on LinkedIn or on your CV, is aligned to who you actually are. And then there's the actual practice of doing your job, whether you're in finance, whether you are out in the field, whether you're managing a group of people, whatever that looks like for you on a day-to-day basis. There are different elements of emotional intelligence that you can apply there to be able to flourish in the place that you are currently serving. And then, of course, there's the place of leadership. And I don't usually like to say leadership, it's for an elect few, but we are all leaders in our own right. The fact that you are here, that you are investing in yourself, it's because there's some sort of benefit that you're going to get here that is hopefully going to influence the people that you're serving, the people that you work with, the people that you are leading if you are in a leadership position. And so it's important. You might be leading your home, you could be leading different groups. That's really important. So in the very start off point, it's estimated that when you do any sort of online search, if you go to Google right now and look at what are the top, I see somebody asking for short notes. Yes, I will share my slides. I think they have good enough information, so I will share those afterwards. Thank you, Nasir. So if you go onto Google and look at what are the top skills that employers are looking for 2022, and even if you look at it across different industries, usually if it's a list of 10, 7 out of the 10 things will be soft skills. Okay, so things to do with teamwork, things to do with listening, with communication, with presentation skills, things related to do with leadership, etc. So 7 out of 10, so about 70%, 60 to 70% of the skills, top skills that most employers are looking for have to do with interpersonal relationships. And a huge part of those, I think I mentioned at the beginning, emotional intelligence is not these loud and shouty things, but a lot of emotional intelligence has direct impact on your interpersonal relationship with other people, okay? And so that's why it's important, because these 7 out of 10 things have direct, you can look at the correlation between those 7 things. So if we're talking about listening has to do with empathy, which is one of the elements of emotional intelligence. When we talk about being able to constitute a good team, that has to do with being able to identify what potential people have, what strengths they have, how they work with each other, what their emotions are when they come together in a team, and being able to regulate all of that. So the place of emotional intelligence cannot be underscored enough. So we start with your CV or your resume. So one of the things obviously that would be being looked for by employers are these different elements to do with emotional intelligence. But you can't just write in your CV, obviously, high emotional intelligence. Number one, just indicating that it's like when people say, I am very humble, that's a trait that they have. Not realizing that just by giving that statement, it undermines the thing that they're trying to communicate. So, there you are saying, I'm the most humble person in my family, the most humble person in this industry. No, you're not. So you can't really write high emotional intelligence in those exact words in your CV. So you'd probably be using words that demonstrate or articulate or communicate the fact that you are using emotional intelligence. And so I've put out there a list of a number of synonyms that you can use. So things like optimistic about, shared optimism in regards to this and this and the other, was able to innovate, having seen an opportunity with this and this and the other. Okay, so talking about openness, talking about my perceptiveness. So your level of perceptiveness about certain situations. So have you been so do you have some level of intuition or perceptiveness in terms of maybe recruiting people or getting clients or getting into certain spaces? Is there some sort of awareness that you have concerning how people behave or how people show up in certain spaces that has been an advantage for you in your career to this particular point in time? Okay, and only you would know what that would look like for you in your particular role. But those are some of the words that you can use for you to be able to communicate elements of emotional intelligence in your CV. Okay, and I think maybe I wouldn't spend too much time there right now because that would vary from person to person. Maybe what would be more beneficial is talking about things like interviews, because in interviews is where you have opportunities to articulate and to demonstrate your emotional intelligence in action. Okay, so in situations where they would ask you about conflict, or they would ask you about difficult clients that you've had to deal with, or ask you about difficult team members that you've had to deal with, or situations where you've had to cancel a contract with maybe a partner that you were working with, or situations where you've had to change things. Maybe you had planned to do things one way and a project didn't work, or maybe you didn't get funding, or whatever it is that came up in that particular situation. It's your opportunity to be able to demonstrate your emotional intelligence. So maybe it's with regards to so as you're explaining a situation, so maybe we had a situation where a client was going to sign a particular deal, and then in the last minute, maybe somebody swooped in, so there's some sort of type of undercutting. So being able to identify as you communicate, being able to identify, in that moment, I felt extremely disappointed about that because I'd been working about it for so long, for some time. Number one, you've already indicated that you are aware of what you are feeling. Then you move on to from what you did from that. And so because of that particular situation, I had maybe an insider in that organization, and I was able to reach out to them. I sent them an email to outline the steps, the different things that had happened in this particular situation. And then from that, I was able to see and appreciate their point of view in regards to this. And maybe we as an insurance company had let them down in the past, and therefore I identified that this was an area, a sore point for them. And this is what I was able to do in terms of providing them with a solution. So you've identified your own emotion, you have identified how you are able to self-regulate in terms of not lashing out, you didn't go and burn down this organization or the competitor, you were able to communicate effectively via email or through an in-person meeting, then you are able to hear out the other party. Even though, yes, you were supposed to sign this contract, in the last minute, they don't want to sign it with you, they want to sign it with somebody else, you are able to provide a platform for them to share their grievances with you or to share their difficulty with dealing with your particular organization. And then in the end, this was the outcome, whether positive or negative. In that light, the outcome of that particular engagement is not really the key thing. It's more, how are you able to manage yourself? How are you able to manage other people? Okay. So looking at how do you show that in an interview? So even things like, maybe where you've been the go-to person for advice, maybe you have been part of orienting new staff, or you have been part of maybe a task force that was developed in the workplace, things that just show that you are more than just your technical skills, because anybody can give technical skills. I always tell people this in interview prep, everyone can give technical skills, but what unique thing about you, and one of the unique things about you can always be something to do with your emotional intelligence that you can offer to the organization. Things like communicating your weaknesses and strengths, also have a lot to do with you demonstrating your emotional intelligence. The weakness that you choose to share in an interview can make or break your interview. I have been part of very many interviews and interviewing panels, and it is really an entertaining activity most of the time, just because, sometimes it's very evident this person doesn't see themselves. The way they're communicating means like there's a disconnect between how the world sees them and how they see themselves. So like in communicating weaknesses, sometimes people, and I share this often on my different platforms, that people will want to identify a very good, so people will ask me things like, so what's a good weakness to have? And I'm like, I don't, that's a wrong question. There's nothing like a good weakness. Number one is identifying that everyone has a weakness, including the people who are interviewing you. But number two is being able to identify a weakness that doesn't directly impact your job. I remember when we have interviews for, especially like interns and people who are just joining the workplace, sometimes people will even say things like, yeah, I'm not a morning person. Like I don't see myself being able to make it every single day in the morning. And like they don't hear themselves. This job requires you to be here by 8 every single day, Monday to Friday. So when you say to people that, you're not a morning person, you don't see yourself. Obviously, some work needs to be done there. But then even with more serious weaknesses, not just about identifying a weakness that could cost you, but it's being able to identify any weakness. Are you aware that you have this weakness? That's number one. Number two, what are you doing about this weakness? Okay. Every time I speak to any group of people, I will always start with self-disclosure in terms of, guys, I speak really fast, and I'll say that in a different number of ways. I speak really fast, that's my weakness. However, then I put it back to the audience. I let people know that they have the ability and opportunity to interrupt me or to ask me questions, to take me back, to, write it in the chat, or to, I give them the power and the opportunity and the autonomy to be able to do something about this weakness of mine. But secondly, I also let people know that I am aware that I have this weakness, and I am, actively keep it in my mind to be able to speak slower, to be able to communicate more clearly as I do that. In an organization, for example, we once had interviews for the organization was hiring for somebody who was going to run a guest house and a training facility, and the guest house, training facility, and the kitchen. So they had a restaurant. And so one of the people that we interviewed came and he says, my problem, nakuanga na shida ya nani, anger. I just have an anger problem, and people know that I have an anger problem. So I remember sitting there and looking at, and then he stopped there. So I was like, oh, okay. All right. Then he just said, yeah, I can be very angry. People from my place, we can be very angry. So I was like, oh, okay. So in my mind, I remember thinking to myself, okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean that, we need to have police on site because you could take someone out? Does that mean you could, the rest of the employees are going to be in danger? Like, what does that mean? So it's not a bad thing to have a weakness. It's, are you aware that you have this weakness? And then the onus should not be on me as an employer to manage your weakness. Like, you need to be aware. So a different rendition of that would have been, in the past, I've had difficulty with getting really upset because I get really passionate about projects. And when I find that my team members are not pulling their weight, I can get, quite angry. However, because I'm aware of that, some of the things that I have done, I'm going through therapy, anger management therapy, because it's also affected my family. But also I can tell when I'm getting upset, and I usually will excuse myself from a meeting, or I will ask people to, come and speak to me at a later time. There are people who, I've heard people say things like a weakness that they have had in the past is that they don't take criticism well. So of course, if you give feedback and if you're in an interview and you say something like, I'm not really good with criticism, that's not a good thing, because you need to be you'll be criticized. Of course, you want constructive criticism, but you will still get criticism. So it now just makes you seem like you're the kind of person who is, we have to like tiptoe around. But you could say that in a different way, which is, in the past, I have noticed or I have received feedback that I can, because I'm so passionate about my work, I can take criticisms about my work very personally, okay? And that has been, an issue for me, because I give my all to my work, and therefore when I get criticism on it, I previously, or I used to, or I am coming out of a cycle where I attach that criticism to myself. I have been able to, over X amount of time, I have been able to work through that. And now when people give me feedback that I don't feel like is maybe the most positive, I ask them to give me more specific details, because many times we feel criticized as individuals, even though somebody's criticizing our work. They're just like, listen, your presentation could have been better in this particular way. And it's not an extension of you are a bad person, you need to be better. It's really the work. So you can communicate to the people interviewing you that, I used to have this problem, and now I am working towards it. Because again, like I said, having the weakness is not the problem. It is being able to show that, one, you're aware of the weakness, but secondly, you're doing something about it. And because you're doing something about it, the organization does not have to worry about you being having to manage you. So if you say like I have an anger problem, so does that mean that in addition to my general work that I have in my HR docket, I have to always keep coming to check on you like, oh man, are you angry today? You know, like I don't have to manage you. If I know that you're aware of your weakness and you're working on it, I have more respect for you and more appreciation for you as a human being and as in, you know, in your own journey, as opposed to somebody who would either pretend they don't have a weakness or not communicate that effectively in terms of what they're doing to work on it. I will say another part of that is not listing all your weaknesses. This is not an interview, is not a therapy session. It's not bare it all. I'm sure we know that, but sometimes people can get really carried away. I usually tell people give no more than one weakness. Everything else, it's like a relationship, what a Julia Mbele, you know, all these things people will find out further on. But of course, in terms of your strengths, being able to communicate those. I see a really good question here. Simon is asking, how do you speak about your strengths without looking like you're bragging or sharing your weakness without looking incompetent? And so I think I've talked about the weakness. So the weakness should not be something that's directly related to the role. So if you're going to get a role that requires you to, maybe it's a front-facing role, you need to go and speak to clients. You cannot come into the interview and say, my weakness is that I have an inability to speak to people. Like I'm terrified of speaking to people. So how will you fulfill the role, right? So it can't be that kind of weakness. Even maybe you might have that weakness, keep it to yourself, work on it privately. But that can't be something that you say, because of course that will make you seem incompetent for the particular role, because it's a central skill that's required for that particular role. But I think you can identify other weaknesses that don't have that sort of ramification on how they perceive you. In terms of your strengths, it has a lot to do with you being able, because it's not just about the strengths part. I tell people the whole element of being able to interview well is a skill that everybody needs to have, because whether you're interviewing for a job, for funding, partnership, you're starting, you need investors, whatever it is, the skill is the same. Being able to understand that when you go into an interview, you're not going in there as somebody who is, you're not, what's the word? I want to say you're not inferior, but that's not the word I want to use, but let me use the word inferior for now. You're not inferior coming into that conversation. If in any way you perceive yourself as inferior and you communicate, and you'll communicate that through your body language, you'll communicate that through how you answer questions, then of course you are not at the same level of thinking about an interview as a value exchange conversation, because you're there because the organization has a need and you believe within yourself that you have what it takes to meet the need of the organization. And so when you are talking about your strengths, so if you've already had that mindset before, so it's a whole other conversation, but if you've had that mindset before and you've been communicating that effectively from the start of the interview, when it comes to the place of communicating strengths, I tell people, if you're convinced that you literally have what it takes for this organization to be able to solve the need that they have in terms of a person that will do something and to be able to take the organization to the next level, as you're communicating your strengths, you're not just bragging about yourself. So I'm not just here, even if I start saying things here that I'm really good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. I'm not saying things that are one out of context. It's only a problem if the things you're talking about are out of context things. So if I come here and I start saying, guys, I'm a really good cook, I'm really, really good at baking and all these things, they might be true things, but they're irrelevant things, and I look like I am just talking about myself for the sake of talking about myself. If you study a company's or an organization's job description, if you know this is what they need and you're confident that you have, whether it's the qualifications, the skill set, or the experience or exposure to be able to answer those things, when you're talking about your strengths will speak directly to the things that they are looking for. If they're looking for somebody who has experience in managing teams cross-culturally, when you talk about a strength that you have, maybe is diversity management, maybe because your strengths should either be related to people or tasks that are going to be pertinent to the job that you're applying for, okay? So you will talk about maybe the diversity management, and you'll talk about something specific. You know, one of the strengths that I have been commended for, or one of the things that I have received feedback for, or one of the places I see my work having greatest impact is in the area of diversity management. When I worked at company XYZ, I was in charge of this and this and this and the other. This was what the team sort of looked like, and this was what the impact of my strength was on the organization. So we talk about strength in action. So you speak about your strengths in a strength in action type of format. I hope that helps. Simon, with regards to that. But again, also that takes a lot of emotional intelligence. You can't just be there just talking about yourself. You talk about yourself, but within the context of, I am bringing value to this organization. And of course, at the end of the day, you're going to demand value from the organization, the amount of money they're going to pay you, the benefits you'll get, the exposure, the training, whatever it is you're looking for in this organization. Hopefully you'll be able to, the better it is you can articulate your value to the organization, the more value you will get in return. All right. And then we have your daily work in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So previously we talked about maybe your CV, your interview, but now when you're in your regular work, how do you use emotional intelligence? So where can that feature for you to be able to be perceived better by people, or also to be able to advance your career, so people your reputation is improving in the workplace, you are feeling like you're having better network connections, you're interacting well with people, you're being more effective in your work. And I've listed a couple of them in that particular slide. One of them is the motivation element, and we talked about that when we're looking at the facets of emotional intelligence. Motivation. So motivation is a huge part of you being able to show up every day for work and show up with positivity and good energy to be able to contribute, to work well with your teammates. The second one is dealing with difficult situations or dealing with setbacks. Emotional intelligence and especially self-regulation has a lot to do with helping you deal with things not going right. You might have a meeting, you think you're bagging this client, and then things change. Or you think that you are going to be promoted and somebody else is promoted. Or you get fired, or your position is declared redundant, or you get demoted, or you are transferred to a different region. All those things, all those setbacks can cause you to walk in a way or to respond in a way that is not honorable, in a way that does not propel you further in your career. But if you have good self-regulation, if you have the ability to pause, reflect with yourself, and manage your emotions, then it helps you a lot in terms of dealing with setbacks. Things like mediating office conflict or disputes. That's something else that you can do. Emotional intelligence. People with high emotional intelligence are usually the ones people will speak to about issues. You're usually the ones who will be stepping up to handle situations. There's a conflict in a particular department or with your colleagues, things to do with clients. You might be the one, or you have opportunities to use your emotional intelligence in those ways. And of course, those things can be things you talk about in your interviews, can be things that you include in your resume. Okay. My slide is so tiny on this. Oh, wait, actually, I'm trying to see what else is on the slide there. But all those different elements, being able to work well in teams has a lot to do with emotional intelligence, because you realize that even though somebody, sometimes, many times we catch feelings or we get upset about situations when the situation has nothing to do with us. Somebody already walks into the office really, really upset. Maybe you don't notice that, or you don't pick up that something has happened like that. And then this person starts speaking to you in a way that you don't feel they should be speaking to you, or they look at you in a certain way. And then now that affects your whole day. It affects your whole ability to work with this person. But if you realize that this person has their own problems, they have their own issues, they have their own emotions, and you're able to separate that person's emotions from your own worth and well-being and your own emotions, that is also really, really helpful and helps with working out in teams. And then lastly is the issue about leadership. Okay, I think we mentioned earlier, you can all think about leaders who you feel that person just needs to be a little bit more mature. And when we usually say mature, we mean they need to have more emotional intelligence. Maybe it's a boss who talks about people's personal problems with other colleagues, a boss who has no discretion. It could be a boss who does not, Caroline, I see your hand. I think this is my second last slide before so let me just finish this train of thought and then I'll come to you. Thank you. So bosses who do things like that, and maybe you're the boss and people have been hinting, or you didn't know that's not a problem. This is, sort of like your hint from maybe people who have been praying and fasting, that you would get it. So things like being able to, emotional intelligence helps leaders to be able to see their team members, okay? To be able to see where people's strengths are, to see potential in people, and then to be able to constitute teams that work well together. There's certain people, and I'm sure depending on how long you've been working, you've seen leaders who always have teams that work around them, and leaders who are the exact opposite, who, regardless of whether a team is functioning, when they come into the team, now the team starts falling apart because of certain things that, that environments that they create. Because leaders who are insecure, leaders who do not know how to manage their own emotions, create environments where people are insecure, people are fearful, people don't have confidence. But a good leader will also inspire confidence, will reassure their team members, will be able to give opportunity to team members to be able to flourish, because that's sort of the emotion they're trying to create. Because I think we talked about the social skills element has to do with also you impacting other people's emotions. So you can create the emotional atmosphere of your team by cultivating some of these things: assurance, affirmation, celebrating your team members. Something else that is very beneficial for leaders is being able to extend empathy and extend understanding, or show compassion to your team members. Okay, so if we know that there's a team member who has recently had a baby, what kinds of things can you do to be able to extend, to let them know that you see and affirm their new season of life, their emotional journey that they're on, but also to cultivate a sense of empathy in the rest of your team members, because a good leader will teach by modeling good emotional intelligence, and will call their team members to places where they can be able to impart that to other people, and be able to show that to the rest of their team members. Okay, and there's a number of other things on there, but you'll be able to read that later when you have the notes. All right. So in conclusion, so what? I mean, there are different elements. You might be already taking notes, and you see places where you can grow, or places where you'd like to maybe study this a bit more. But bottom line, when we're talking about emotional intelligence, we're thinking about identifying, regulating emotions within ourselves and other people, and then being able to use that regulated place and identification of emotions to be able to make decisions that are rational and that have measured action, or measured impact, that will not disadvantage you as an individual, disadvantage the people around you, and especially in terms of your career, being able to move forward to the next level. Okay, it's important for you to spend time regularly in personal and social reflection. So by personal reflection, I mean, I usually tell people at least once a month, have a meeting with yourself. Have a meeting with yourself, and this is not just for emotional intelligence, it's just generally with your career. Find out, okay, in this month, and if you have more time, you can do it once a week, you can do it daily. What has sort of been my emotional, where have I been on the chart this month? Have I been more excited? And then certain things can also help you with making career decisions. So maybe in a particular month or a particular quarter, you had been assigned a particular type of project, and you realize you actually really enjoyed this type of work. Maybe it was work you had never done before. There's a lady I met 2 weeks ago. Her background is in IT and software engineering and that kind of thing, but now she's in HR, and she's leading a really big team at the UN in the line of HR. And she said she never thought of herself in HR. It's just that one time they had an opportunity for job or rotation in the workplace, and she did something, collaboratively did something in HR. And then she realized, my goodness, this has been the happiest I've felt at work in a particular month. And that's what sort of gave her an inkling into, okay, this could be something. This emotion here is telling me something about where my gifts and where my experience and skill set is best served. And that's how she moved on into that. So personal reflection in terms of highs at work, lows at work, highs in your interaction with clients or with other people around you. And I say personal and social reflection. So being able to, candidly ask people around you, like where would you say I am in terms of managing my own emotions? Are there instances where you see that I get a bit out of control, out of whack? Are there times you don't feel me being empathetic? Are there times you feel like I'm not really like I don't really show up for myself or show up for other people. Get that feedback from people around you. And then you can also look at your performance appraisals, however often you get performance appraisals. Look at what people specifically say. Sometimes it could be it doesn't work well in a team, but the key thing there, it doesn't work well with team members, or is impatient with team members, or is impatient with junior staff, is the fact that maybe you just don't have empathy, or you don't have good social skills. And then now that you know, you can do something about it. And then seek ways to invest in your own emotional intelligence. The good thing about emotional intelligence is that you can grow. You can start today at self awareness, and eventually, after a good period of time, move on up. Because there's books that you can read. I have some resources here that I'll share with you, some book resources. There are trainings you can go and be part of. There can be therapy that might be beneficial for you. Just lots of different things. There's many avenues for you to be able to grow in emotional intelligence. So make it a priority for you, because there's a lot of impact from that in your career. And these are some recommended resources. Of course, the first two there are Daniel Goleman's books. He has a couple of videos on YouTube as well. So if you're more, you're less a reading person and more an audio person, there's those options. Of course, you can get audiobooks. There's the book, phenomenal book by Stephen Covey on 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because that is all about managing yourself and how you show up in the world. There are newer books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, which don't really agree with all of what is said in the book, but there are some gems there. And then Eric Fromm's The Art of Loving, because it has a lot to do with internal introspection and how you're able to show up better in the world for the communities around you. So I will share these slides with Ian, and hopefully he'll be able to share it with everybody else. Thank you very much for your time. I think I've taken a little bit over an hour, but thank you very much for your time. And I am now open to questions. Let me hand over back to the MC, and he can guide us through that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angie, for that elaborate and wonderful presentation. Indeed, it has been excellent, and I believe elaborately understood by all of us. So ladies and gentlemen, it's time for you to raise your hands and present your questions, and then we should be able to get them answered.
I think Caroline, sorry, I think Caroline had raised her hand.
Yes, please. You had a hand.
Hi, Angela.
Hi, Caroline.
Yeah, I had a hand.
Yes.
Thank you for the brief. It's quite insightful, and you're grateful now. I had a question, but apparently you got to answer it through when you're doing your presentation on what would you do when you're dealing with a leader who has issues with their emotional intelligence, which you handled quite well.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad it's answered your question.
Well, Angela, I will take us to the feedback, and maybe we are able to look at the chat together.
Yes, I see a question here. I think I'd answered Simon's first question. Miriam was asking about how do you deal with a bad day at work? Yeah, I think one of the things, I think one of my very early YouTube videos was something that was about help, I want to quit my job. And in that particular presentation, I was sharing, it's important for you to figure out why exactly you want to quit your job, because sometimes it could be, you could isolate in this whole reflection process. You can isolate, maybe the issue is a particular boss, or the issue is a particular element of your work. And the same thing happens with talking about like a bad day at work. Because sometimes somebody will say, oh, I've had a bad day, a bad week, a bad month. But really, if you spend time looking at it, you'll realize that it was maybe not a bad day. It was maybe you had a bad encounter. So maybe as you drove into work, you had an accident with your car, God forbid, or you had a really bad review, or something happened. There's a particular thing that you can identify. And that's what we talked about in self-regulation, being able to identify, okay, I'm feeling sad or upset about this day, and what exactly is it? So going into the digging deep, doing the work of digging deep and identifying what it is that was the issue. And then being able to, okay, I've identified the issue. What am I going to do about it? Is it something that I can fix for tomorrow? Because if it's a person that I have to see every single day, now it's not, I can't move jobs overnight, but maybe it's that I need to have a conversation with this person, or, you know, I could request a transfer, or, you know, so what specific thing can you do to be able to avoid or to fix this particular situation? Maybe it was just a one-off thing. One of the things, if you read this, the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, he talks about 4 different lessons. One of them is talking about with different emotions, there's value in dwelling in them. So you know how sometimes you're really feeling really angry, and the example he gives there is that maybe you're driving and then somebody cuts you off, and instead of you just, okay, maybe you say a few words, but instead of you just leaving it there, now imagine you hooting at this person, you follow them to the path, the street they're on, and then the person cuts you off, and then now he stops, you come out of the car, you start yelling at them. I mean, sometimes you feel like, if I'm really angry, the more I vent that anger, the more I talk about it, the more it will be resolved. And many times with anger specifically, it does not actually do that. It seeps into, and it usually gives increased negative results, but also seeps into many other areas of our lives and creates a worse quality outcome than other things. But with things like sadness, there is a place for you to be able to, quote unquote, mourn the sad day, you know, or the situation that you're going through. Of course, I'm not talking about death or anything like that. I'm talking about smaller magnitude things. There's a place for, okay, being sad about I didn't get this job opportunity, but am I going to lock myself in the house for the next 1 month? I will not do that. There's a place for sadness, but there also has to be a place for now the next level of emotional intelligence, which is being able to summon those positive feelings or get connected to somewhere where those positive feelings will come to. For some people, it's meditation, others it's prayer, others it's, you know, going for therapy, whatever it is. I need to be able to move from that place of sadness within a healthy sort of turnaround time. So if you have a bad day, identify, was it really a bad day or was it a bad moment? What's that bad moment? Can I do anything about it differently? Can I redeem that bad moment in whatever way? If not, then, you know, you just take it in. Oh, it sucked. If you want to have your ice cream, you have your ice cream, or whatever it is that you do. That's a healthy coping something, and then you move on and you just show up the next day, because life is bad days and good days.
Thank you for that, Angie. I will still take you to how can one deal with individuals who undermine others at the workplace without looking like you are combative.
Right. Without knowing too much of this particular situation, many times when people have those kinds of tendencies, is usually because they're very insecure. I think one of the things that can be helpful is being able to sort of beat them at their own game. So if, you know, there are people who would try and steal your ideas, or try and pass off your ideas as their own, or try and make you look bad in a particular situation, you ride on that particular thing. So say, for example, we're in a conversation or in a meeting, and you say something and somebody sort of tries to belittle that, you know, you could turn that back to them, you know, be like, oh, it's interesting that you'd think about it that way. You know, I hadn't, you know, so it's like you're not going to sink to their level to now go back and forth with them, but use their comment, their negative, sarcastic comment, their whatever it is that they're trying to throw in that particular situation to make it be undermined, to be a learning opportunity. So it's so that it seems like you're educating them. So in terms of you responding to them, to educate them on why you have thought this through, or why maybe the question they've asked, you tell them, oh, maybe I hadn't really actually thought about that. I hadn't thought about if we go out in the market in that particular way, that could be a ramification. However, these are the things that I am focusing on. But because you've brought up such a good point, I will actually research it, because it wasn't in the scope of what we were doing. And and I will get back to you. Okay, so you don't let them in that conversation space. Don't let what they say, which now undermines everything that you've said, be the last word that everyone takes away. Respond to them as if you have no clue that they're trying to undermine you. You're just responding to them in a, let me educate you, let me bring you up to, you know, why I'd already thought that through, or why that wouldn't work, or why this is a different perspective. That's one. But secondly, there are people in the area of people stealing your ideas and things like that. When you make presentations, so if they are going to make those presentations, if you have an opportunity to speak, you say you can, that at that point you can speak about, you know, when me and so were working on this, when I provided the research to so and so to be able to present, when I did this and this and this, so that you don't leave them out, because now you don't want to look like you're being combative or you're being catty or you're being petty in the workplace. You just want to make sure that your name is also there. So you're being able to point out specific things. When I did the research, when I met client XYZ on Tuesday last week, and then came and shared with this person, whether or not you shared with this person, because now they're the ones who are making the presentation or doing whatever it is, you know, I was able to get this, or we were able to get this. So don't let them leave you out of that conversation, and you don't push them out either. There's a lot of emotional intelligence required, because you also don't want to be perceived in a way that you're not. You don't want people to think, yes, that you're combative, or that you are self-serving, because sometimes it could be a legitimate thing. This person is actually trying to undermine you, but it ends up being that you look like the crazy one, or you look like the one who is not working as a team member. So I hope that is helpful.
Thank you so much, Angie, for that. I can see Madam Director's hand is up. Madam Director, if you have your question, please proceed.
Thank you, Angie, for the beautiful presentation. I don't know what I can say, but personally, I have felt that it has really helped us in so many areas. And I have a question. I'm struggling to put it together, even I myself. The person who is asking the question is struggling to put it together so that it is understandable.
Yes.
But my question is, in life, we have to take risks. That's one thing.
Yes.
And you have people you respect and can consult in the areas you want to take the risk. Those people that, you know, you feel these are, maybe let me use even the name professional in that area. And therefore, if I go and ask this person, I am sure I am going to get the right answer. However, some of these people can really discourage you. They can tell you how what you want to do is not viable, and they will tell you all the negatives about what it is that you are trying to do, without actually even showing you a glimpse of the other positive side. And so my question is, how do you deal with these kind of people, and how do you deal with yourself in terms of the very good presentation you have given us, so that you avoid being discouraged and you avoid giving up your dream, and even as you probably consider some of the things that they have said, and maintain a balance which will help you to do what you want to do, or to make the consideration you want to do. Yes, I don't know whether it's clear.
Oh wow, that was very well articulated. I think I got I got it. I think I got
thank
it.
you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think that I think it's a really good question, especially in seasons when people are in career transitions. The conversations we have when people are considering changes in their career, or especially significant leaps, whether it's across different industries or it's across different organizations or whatever sort of life transition, that's usually a concern. And there's different steps that people go through, different feelings, whether it's starting with denial that I actually need to move or want to move. You start feeling regret for the times you've spent here and that kind of thing. Then there's excitement and hopefulness. And part of all of that transition process, we usually advise people obviously to do their research. You do your research, you do as many actions before your actual transition that are less costly. So whether it's shadowing, doing job shadowing, whether it's doing informational interviews with people who are in the positions that you want to get into, professionals, all those things are supposed to be sort of low risk actions that you can take before you make that transition. Because once you make the transition, then now you're in it there. And hopefully those things that you do beforehand propel you into what you want to get into. But sometimes in life, like Madam Director has said, there are people who you expect will be able to give you the helping hand or will give you the insight and the direction, and they don't, for a number of reasons. Sometimes it could be people's own insecurity. I know especially like the media industry, unfortunately in Kenya, there's a lot of that. Like they have so many frustrated professionals moving between stations, moving between media houses, because it's very cutthroat and people don't want to help you because, I usually like to teach about the poverty mindset and the abundance mindset, so which you may or may not have heard about. So people who operate in the poverty mindset feel like there's a fixed amount of success or fixed amount of opportunities that are available in the world. And so if I help you, it's going to diminish my opportunity to advance in my career. So if I give you tips, if I give you advice, if I give you something from where I am, there'll be less for me. So there's less of the pie. People who are in the abundance, who operate in the abundance mindset, have a different worldview. So it's that opportunities are there. What's for me is for me. What God has for me, or what is set out for me, what's in my destiny or my purpose, I will get. If it's not mine, I will not get it. And it's okay. There's enough room for all of us. When you go to a market, you'll find 10 people selling the same exact thing, and they're right by each other. And each of those people close, they have sales, they feed their families, they come back the next day, because they understand that as long as it's a product that people want, there will always be people to buy. And so sometimes that's the reason why people will discourage you, because you're going to be a threat. Maybe they've already perceived that you're really strong in certain areas. And when you come into the space that they're in, that's it. They're going to be finished. Maybe they are not secure in themselves, in what maybe they're experiencing imposter syndrome. So they don't feel like if they feel like if you come on board and you're one of the people they're quote unquote competing with, they will lose out, or maybe they will lose their job. So that could be a motivator. And it's very human, it's very common. Sometimes it could just be that this person doesn't see it. Think about different industries and the disruptions that there are across all industries in the world. Let's not even talk about the pandemic. Let's talk about something as simple as taxi companies, right? There was a long time where we used to just use cabs, regular cabs. Like if you wanted a cab between the airport and your house, you'd be prepared to pay, regardless of where you live. Even if you lived on Mombasa Road, you'd pay 2,000, 3,000 at a minimum, because those airport taxis used to charge that amount, right? And then somebody came and there was this technology, and now we have Uber, we have Bolt, we have Little Cab, all those things. There are certain people who refused to believe that this would ever change, like that this would ever be a thing. People who lost out on investments or opportunities to join in the new market because they just couldn't see how will Kenyans who love matatus and will not take taxis to do anything, how will people move from that place to a place where everybody on their phone has an app doing these different things? For some people, the reason they're so discouraging or telling you they don't work is because they don't have the vision. They don't have the insight. They haven't caught that, for lack of a better word, revelation or insight or ability to conceptualize that thing. And of course, in many organizations, those are the people who are usually shown the door once a new disruptive technology or disruptive way of doing things happens. So it could be something innocent like that. It could also be something that is negatively motivated. So whatever the case is, you come to this person and they're giving you all these negative things. I think it's also you by yourself remembering that the transition is yours, the life is yours. So even when you go to people to ask for input and to ask for ideas and things like that, it always has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Like people will give you tips and ideas based on their experience, based on their history, based on their knowledge, but they don't have the full they don't have the whole hold of knowledge. They don't know everything. They only know a part of the whole. They might know about the Kenyan industry. They might know about a particular sector, the hospitality sector. They might know about these kinds of trainings, but they might not know the next thing. So you take what everyone says with a pinch of salt, knowing that, you know, I don't know this person's heart. They might seem like they're doing it out of a good heart or a negative position, but you know, I'll take it with a pinch of salt. And then if there's a situation where you have consistent negative feedback, I think that would be a useful place in terms of emotional intelligence to come back and have a meeting with yourself again and evaluate it objectively. Okay, so I really thought that I could get into this space, or I really thought this business idea would work. But based on people who have been in this industry, I have gotten this feedback. Objectively evaluate that feedback. Is this feedback based on their own fear? Is this feedback based on facts? Because then maybe it will take you back to the drawing board to be like, okay, maybe it won't work the way I want it, but maybe I can tweak it. Another thing could be maybe the people that you automatically thought you should speak to are not the ones you're supposed to speak to. Usually with our career coaching program, we talk about like when we're sending people for informational interviews, we will always start with, okay, there could be people you already have in your network who you can speak to about going to the next level, or professionals you can access. But sometimes those people are overly familiar with you, or they're not going to give you the feedback you want or give you the exposure you want. So you might need to seek out other people who are in the same sort of position, but people who you haven't interacted with, who would be able to listen to you objectively and give you that sort of guideline. You might have to reach out outside the country. You might have to do, you know, like talk to people across the continent or even across the globe who might be in similar situations. You might have to reach out to people on LinkedIn who you now establish fresh connections with, because the ones that you have access to are not giving you the feedback you need. And even after you've evaluated their feedback, you realize it's not feedback that is like if you go back to your facts and you look at your numbers, you look at the opportunities, you look at what you had at the beginning, you realize I still want to go in this direction. So you might seek out other people, or at the end of the day, you'll just take the leap. Steve Harvey talks a lot about taking the leap. At some point, you just have to jump and realize, okay, what's the worst that can happen at this point? Like the worst that can happen is I now jump into baking. Angela becomes a baker, and then people don't buy my cakes. And then I just have to shut down, and that's it. I mean, I tried it, because again, at the end of the day, we just have one life, and not everything will be perfect, and we just have to take the risk on ourselves. If that is the place where, if you still feel convicted, compelled, drawn to this particular path, then I'd always say just take the risk, and mengine tutajulia mbele. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angie. I am looking at the interest of time. We are looking at a possibility of having had been concluded in the past 6 minutes, but we appreciate the precise answering. I note that there's a hand from Bwana Peter Kagia. Peter, even as you ask your questions, I believe you can also do it in the full awareness that you will be doing the closing remarks and the final prayer. Please proceed, Peter. Peter, if you can proceed, we are listening.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to have some comments around a team dynamics where one of the members is actually exhibiting some characters of narcissism. How to manage that in the team dynamics so that the team actually end up delivering on its mandate.
Wow, that's a fantastic question. I think number one, I think I would really affirm, if you're the leader in the team, affirm your ability to identify that, because sometimes that goes unnoticed. So that is fantastic. I think the second thing is being able to, and it doesn't have to be in depth. When you study narcissistic behavior, there's certain things that feed narcissistic behavior. And as a team leader, your responsibility is then to cut off the supply, or cut off the ability of the person displaying narcissistic behavior, from being able to exert that on the rest of the team. So whether it is the fact that they like to isolate, certain people, certain characteristics, or there's some level of bullying, or so it could be that this person is feeding off of XYZ. So I will, in their job description or in their role and responsibility, they will no longer have access to these other people where they can feed off of those particular things. You can direct their narcissistic tendencies or their reporting or their job elements more. You can link this person closer to you as the leader, so that they are not getting the satisfaction of being able to control other people or to do all the things that they would be doing with the rest of the team members. The other thing is also just doing trainings. Sometimes there have been situations where people are displaying narcissistic behavior and they don't know. And even team members are feeling, maybe the institutions where they're feeling gaslighted or they're feeling insecure and they're not really sure why. But when you have, I think, more of like trainings or awareness seminars or even information that your team is empowered on, then you find yourself you find your team members being able to call out certain behaviors or being able to come and report certain things to you. So sometimes people have these tendencies, but they don't really know they're operating in that way. And nobody has ever challenged them, nobody has ever told them about it. So in addition to cutting off their supply of how they would be operating sort of independently in the team, you sort of bring them closer to you and disconnect them or disconnect their sort of blood supply, quote unquote, and then educate the whole team to be able to identify these are not regular happenings in a team. And of course, without shaming this person, these are not regular happenings in a team. These are not things that you should accept. Having an open door policy so that people can be able to speak out about these things, anonymous reporting, and hopefully that is helpful as a start off point. I've seen the timer going off, so I will stop there. But my contact information is there. You can feel free to email me. That's the best way to reach me. And I'll be more than happy to respond or engage further with one or all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angie, for that. We appreciate everyone who has participated in our session today. I believe in your questions, in any way that you've participated, by your concentration, your silence, and of course your chats and questions. We may not have answered one or two of them, but I request that you get to interact with Angie one-on-one, and I'm sure she'll be able to give you more precise and in-depth answers. Of course, Angie, the MC's discount, I may be able to share my CV, then you see what things we can do to improve it so that I climb the ladder at MC's discount. That one we'll share offline. And by virtue that your night running ancestors are also the same as mine. So thank you very much. Now, having appreciated that, thank you also, Tazmin. I believe she dropped off because she had another engagement, and everyone who's been able to put this together, the Secretariat of IIK, and under the good leadership, of course, of Mary and the team, and of course the IIK leadership being led by our able director, Agnes Masharia. We appreciate you in a very special way. I can see Ian has a hand up. So Ian, please proceed before I can invite Peter.
Yes, the feedback form is shared on the chat. So your feedback is quite important to us. Try and reply to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian, for that alert. So guys, let's get to click on that feedback and let us get to hear your feedback. Let us get to hear what you have had the experience about this and what you can do to make it a better experience for you next time. Angie, if you don't mind, I would also request that pale kwa chat tuandikie YouTube channel yako inaitwaje and how we can follow you on social media so that we are able to get the insights, especially the nuggets of wisdom that you've shared from the platforms.
Sawa, I'm doing that as we speak.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for that. And now it is my pleasure and privilege again to welcome Bwana Peter Kagia to give us the closing remarks and the closing prayer. It has been an honor to host you. My name is MC Okari, and thank you for being with us to the very end of this program. So over to you, Bwana Peter Kagia.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for having glued each other on to the process we had started, and we are progressing well, and we are coming to the end of this session. I know this is really a personal feed into our career, and we have each and every bit that we are taking home for our own personal consumption, and to ensure that at least we share. We were just reminded today that what brought us here will not necessarily take us there. We are on a journey, a career journey, and personal development. I think this is very important. My role is just basically to pass a vote of thanks, and I think I want to thank all our presenters. Tazmin in absentia, she left for another session, and Angie for be having a very good session with the members of the Insurance Institute of Kenya. I also want to thank the Secretariat for coordinating all the activities, making sure that this day becomes fruitful, reminding all the participants of the date and the time, and joining on to making sure that we join in time. I also want to thank the council members who are in attendance and those who are not able to be with us today for a well-coordinated support courtesy of the membership convener of members services to ensure that members get this chance to get a little more of those skills that we really need from the presenters, and our employers for having given us a chance to be away, or rather give ourselves these 2 hours that we've had together. I know we are on payroll and we are being paid for this, but they gave us a chance. So for members of those who are, the employers represented here, we really thank you for this. And you members, without you, we would have not actually had this day. We want to take this chance to thank you. And above all, if I've not singled any person who has contributed towards this, basically our coordinator, our MC, who has always been there with us all through the time that we're having our activities, MC Okari. Thank you for making sure that you are in time and keeping us glued to our laptops and phones. And if I've not mentioned any other person who have contributed towards this directly or indirectly, please take our sincere appreciation for the chance that and the contribution that you had to make this day a success. Thank you, and may God bless you. We can pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Almighty Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us. We thank you even for the membership of the Insurance Institute of Kenya. We thank you also for the leadership that you've given us into this. We thank you in a special way for our presenters, for sharing with us what they have for the betterment of ourselves and even for our customers and our other stakeholders. We all thank you for all that you provided for us. For those that we not mentioned, we call for the intercession of the Holy Spirit to intervene at every moment. We pray this believing and trusting in Jesus Christ, who is our Lord and Savior. Amen. Thank you, and back to the MC.
Thank you so much, Bwana Peter Kagia, for those elaborate words and appreciation to each of us. Indeed, I also feel appreciated by your very kind words to me. Thank you. Now, thank you, everyone, for sticking with us to the very end. Enjoy your lunch. Bon appetit. Don't forget to give your feedback, and of course, watch out for our next session. Meanwhile, we still remind you to be on standby for the annual conference that will be coming up. So we should be able to have an exciting session. On behalf of everyone who has put this together, thank you once again. God bless you and enjoy the rest of your day. Santeni.
Thank you, MC.